Hello guys, how's it going? I hope you're all doing well. Welcome to my true crime YouTube channel where I go into all the details of a true crime case whilst I do my makeup. Just before we do get into the video, I feel I should give a quick content warning that we are going to be discussing some pretty unsettling topics in today's video, mainly centered around abuse and lying. So if you are at all unsure about this video or feel it might affect you in any way whatsoever, please do feel free to click off and watch something else. I'd also like to give a disclaimer that all the information I've compiled in this video has been sourced from the internet, news reports and family statements. And although I research each case as thoroughly as I can before each video, and of course it is never my intention to spread misinformation or cause offence to anybody involved, please do let me know down below if you see any false information. So with that, let's get right into the case. So in 2009, Tracy Hardy, who was from Macclesfield, which is in the UK, met a man called John, and John's full name isn't actually available online. He decided to keep this private, but the two of them met on a dating site. The two of them clearly hit it off as they started dating and then later got into a committed relationship. The two of them stayed together for around 3 years before they actually separated. I don't know whether it was just sort of difference in interest that caused the two of them to split or whether there was bad blood, but what I do know is that it was pretty much the way that this relationship ended which caused this whole case to kick off. A few weeks before the breakup in 2012, Tracy had actually told John that she suspected she might be pregnant, but John had clearly already kind of decided that he didn't want to stay with Tracy anymore, and he actually ended up dumping her by text. Now obviously Tracy was not the most happy about this. Not only had she been dumped by text, which is obviously not the best way to go about it, but this had also come just after she'd told John that she thought she might be pregnant. The two did keep in contact after the split for a couple of weeks, but their communication was mainly very abusive, and I'm guessing that most of this came from Tracy's end, given that she was still not particularly happy with what John had done. Not long after the two of them broke up and they sort of stopped communicating, Tracy actually discovered that she wasn't pregnant. It had been a false alarm, there was no baby, and this actually set off a bit of a light bulb moment in Tracy's mind. Not only did Tracy decide not to tell John that it had been a false alarm, but she also decided to keep up the pretense of being pregnant. So Tracy got back in contact with John and told him that she was indeed pregnant and that she was also planning to keep the baby. Now, although John had obviously decided that he no longer wanted to be in a relationship with Tracy, he did definitely want to be a part of his child's life, and so he decided to keep things civil with Tracy for the sake of their baby. John and Tracy actually met up again while Tracy was heavily pregnant with their baby, and John said that she was very obviously pregnant. He even sort of touched her belly, and he did say that she seemed to him to be pregnant. Now, I don't know how Tracy actually managed to pull this off. I don't know whether she did the sort of traditional stuffing pillows up her shirt or something else, but either way, she managed to keep up the pretense of being pregnant until she actually told John that she had given birth to their child. Now, this is the point when things in this case start to get really twisted. I feel like you quite frequently hear about stories where women kind of pretend, at least for a short while, to be pregnant in order to kind of keep people in their lives. But Tracy took this like 1,000 steps further, and she actually managed to keep up the pretense to John of having a baby boy for 5 years. Now you're probably wondering, how did this woman, who was very much not pregnant, manage to kind of conjure up a child out of thin air? Well, Tracy had actually been friends with a woman who lived relatively near to her for around 20 years, and this woman had just given birth to a baby boy. And since the family had known Tracy for so long, when she kindly offered to take their little boy out on day trips and look after him, they obviously agreed. And so that little boy became the son that John believed was his. John first met the boy who Tracy told him was called Tyler when he was about 10 weeks old, and John immediately became absolutely besotted with him. He had always wanted a son, and in his eyes, this little boy was just perfect. So John began seeing the little boy very frequently. He used to see him every other weekend, and he absolutely showered him with love. So for 5 whole years, Tracy used to take this little boy out for day trips, as she told his mother, every other weekend, and from what she could tell, her plan had worked perfectly. John was back in Tracy's life, and not only that, but John had actually paid Tracy a substantial amount of money in order to help support her and their son. I don't really know what happened with John and Tracy's relationship during this time. I know the two of them weren't actually back together, however, as there were actually a number of custody battles which went on between the two of them due to John wanting to be able to spend more time with his son. Another thing which John was forced to pour endless amounts of money into. It just never occurred to John, as it wouldn't, that this little boy could possibly not be his son. He did say that looking back on it, there were sort of small signs that Tyler wasn't who Tracy said he was. For example, I believe he once actually referred to himself by his real name, and I don't really know why Tracy decided to change his name in the first place. It seems to make things a lot more complicated than they need to be. Maybe he just had like a very unique name or something that Tracy would never have named her own child. Who knows? Either way though, it's weird. I don't know, I feel like if I were in John's position and my young son had referred to himself by a different name, I would just assume that he was playing pretend or just messing around. I don't think that the first thing that would pop into my head would be that my ex-girlfriend had lied about having a son in order to extort £15,000 out of me. Anyway, 3 years after Tyler had come into John's life, and despite John spending all this money in order to try to keep Tyler there, basically, Tracy actually ended up completely cutting John off in 2015. I don't know whether Tracy did this because she was finally struggling to keep up the charade of having a young son, or whether she simply just wanted to cause John the same pain that he had caused her when he completely cut her off. But either way, this meant that John didn't see Tyler for 2 whole years. So in 2017, after 2 years of trying to get in contact with Tracy and demanding to see his son, John actually ended up reporting Tyler as a missing person to the police. At first, police actually began to fear the worst. They thought that Tyler might have been kidnapped or even murdered, since nobody had seen any sign of this little boy since John had last been around. The thing that confused the police the most about this was that neighbours of Tracy had said that they had seen just absolutely no sign whatsoever of a small child living at Tracy's house. There were no toys, no child's things, there wasn't even a car seat in the back of Tracy's car. And when police actually went to visit Tracy's address in person, they agreed that there was absolutely no sign of a small child living there. The police ended up deciding to just question Tracy face to face, and when they did, she categorically denied ever knowing Tyler or John. I mean, I don't think that she had really thought this through very thoroughly, because the police literally had proof that she knew John, but when it came to Tyler, there literally was no way to prove that this child even existed at all. When police asked her about the time that she had met up with John when he believed that she was heavily pregnant, she said that she had admittedly put on a bit of chunk, but was by no means pregnant. Due to the fact that Tracy was just flat out denying the fact that she knew a little boy called Tyler, the police actually briefly believed that John might be delusional. And as crazy as it sounds, they actually had quite a good argument for proving that Tyler didn't exist, as they'd actually searched up Tyler Hardy's name through social services, and they had found absolutely no trace of him. It was literally as if he didn't exist. Not only this, but they actually searched through Tracy's records as well and found that she had only once been pregnant, and that this had been with a baby girl who was now in her mid-teens, and she was actually living with Tracy, so they knew that this was true. Now, when I first heard about this case, I thought, that sounds like something that would sort of hypothetically be possible to pull off. But if you actually tried to do it in reality, I think it would be a lot harder than you might think. Like, surely even just the court documents which discussed John and Tracy's custody battle would prove the existence of Tyler. But no, Tracy had an excuse for that as well. She said that she had repeatedly tried to contact the courts to tell them that the letters weren't for her. They had got the wrong person. Again, another blatant lie. It looked like the police might genuinely start to believe that John was actually delusional, had it not been for a single photo that John had showed the police. As you can see in this photo, this is John lying on the floor of his sister's house, and on his back is Tyler. Not only this, but in the top left-hand corner is Tracy smiling down at them. So not only did this photo prove that Tracy knew a little boy, but it also proved that Tracy did know John, which caught her in one of her lies. And with this lie, her whole sort of web of lies began to untangle. When the police brought Tracy into the police station to ask her about this photo, they actually went about showing her the photo in what I think is a very clever way. So what they did is they basically folded this photo in half so that only Tracy and John were visible and little Tyler was cut out. And so this meant that Tracy kind of had to admit to knowing John. However, at this point, she was still completely adamant that John was completely making up the existence of a little boy. In case you're curious as to why Tracy actually lied about knowing John in the first place, she said that both the times the police had come to question her about this whole situation were times that she didn't really feel comfortable answering. So the first time she said she had been at work at a relatively new job, so she didn't really want any questions asked. And then the second time she'd actually been at home with her partner, and she'd already had, as she said, a bottle and a half of wine. So she was already a tiny bit sort of impaired with her answers. But she also didn't want to admit to knowing, an ex-boyfriend in front of her current partner. It all sounds like a tiny bit of an excuse, but she had kind of given a reason as to why she had said she hadn't known John. But when the police unfolded the photo and revealed Tyler, she was left in a bit of a sticky situation. So when the police asked her, why she hadn't admitted to knowing this child, her excuse for this was that she had been drinking a lot around the time that this photo was taken, and she couldn't actually remember who the child in the photo was. And when asked for, a possible guess as to who she thought it could be, she said that since they were at John's sister's house, it could have been one of John's relatives. I mean, it's all pretty far-fetched at this point. So ultimately, and actually quite ironically, it was actually Tracy's only real child, her teenage daughter, who was able to shed some light on what had actually happened to cause this situation. So when the police went to question Tracy's daughter about this photo, they showed her it and said, here is a photo of who we believe are your mother, your mother's ex-boyfriend, and your younger brother. And when they said this, Tracy's daughter replied, "That's not my brother, that is the son of our family friend." And so finally, the police were able to piece together what had actually happened. So obviously the police went and spoke to this family, who was apparently, Tyler's real family. And when they asked, if Tracy had actually been spending a lot of time with their son, they said that she had. They said that she had very kindly offered to look after their son several times a week or a month. But they said that since they had just known her for so long, coming on 20 years, they'd just never really thought anything of it. And so, and I can't even imagine how one would go about doing this, the police had to inform John that not only was Tyler not his son, but that he didn't even have a son. And so, unsurprisingly, this was absolutely devastating for John. I mean, finding out that the son that he had spent 5 years pretty much fighting for and ultimately pouring lots and lots and lots of money into as well was not his son. John actually ended up writing a letter to the boy's real parents with his phone number attached in the hopes that they might one day reach out to him. And in this letter, he said, "I need to tell you how much light and joy he brought into my family, my life, and my outlook on life. We loved him, and we still love him. You must be smashing parents to have such a smashing boy." I mean, it's absolutely devastating to read. I feel like you would just feel like you were almost grieving somebody that was still alive. I really hope that Tyler's real parents allowed John to stay in his life to at least a certain extent, but from the way that John worded this letter, somehow I doubt it. John actually ended up keeping the bottle that Tyler had drunk from when he was a baby, and also the box that had contained Tyler's first pair of shoes. And John even admitted that he would never fully get over his loss. Tracy actually admitted to lying about everything and said that it was a petty act of revenge which had spiraled out of control. She did at least show some kind of remorse for her actions. She said that it started off as a small lie which just got bigger and bigger, and she did get to the point where she sort of thought, I've got to stop this is, too much. But she continued with her plan, and honestly, I don't really think there's much excuse for what she did. I mean, I don't really even know how sorry she actually was. She still continued to take John's money and remove Tyler from his life, seemingly without an ounce of regret. She did say that she felt pressured to tell John what was actually going on, but that she just couldn't bring herself to do it because she knew that it would break John's heart. I mean, what you do in that situation is you tell the truth as soon as possible and accept the consequences. You don't just continue on as normal and then lie about it when you get caught. Anyway, Tracy pleaded guilty to fraud and was sentenced to 2 years in prison. I personally think that this is a ridiculously short sentence, considering firstly what Tracy did to John and his mental state, but also to Tyler and probably how this would affect him later down the line. But anyway, that is all I have for you on this case. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, then make sure to let me know what you thought down below, and also let me know if there are any particular cases you'd like me to cover next. As always, don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.